So again, welcome everyone. We're really excited to be bringing this to you tonight. My name's Karen Ferridan. I'm the co-founder of the Better Path Coalition, and our coalition is actually kicking off its new series called Informing the Resistance. So this is the second of two webinars we're doing this week, actually, that address things like curative amendments, like we did the other day, and we have a recording of that. And now tonight, Article 1, Section 27. And I'll get to Maya's introduction in a moment, but I wanted to make a couple of quick announcements. One is that we are co-hosting tonight's event with Green Amendments for the Generations. So we're really excited to be able to partner with a group that we have been really close partners with for a long time. If you're interested in learning more about what's going on in the movement here in Pennsylvania, we actually have a Facebook group that is now over 40,000 members, and it's called Pennsylvania Data Center Resistance. You don't have to worry about how to find the link to that. I'll put it into the email that I sent after this with the recordings link in it. So you can just grab it there. And then finally, as I've said 1,000 times already, please remain on mute during the presentation. And please enter your questions into the chat. If you asked a question in advance, I do have those on hand as well. And so with that, let me get to the introduction that we're all waiting for. Maya Van Rossum is the Delaware River Keeper, and I could just go on for the rest of the hour just talking about all of her accomplishments there. But she's also someone who was the lead petitioner in the landmark Robinson Township Delaware River Keeper Network et al. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania case that breathed new life into Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment. The case, decided by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2013, revived the state's long-ignored amendment empowering it to protect the people's right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And it was that victory that inspired Maya to write the book The Green
Yeah,
Amendment, Securing Our Right to a Healthy Environment,
I'll sit
in
at
which
the
she
table.
coined and defined the term Green Amendment and embarked on the journey of crafting and advancing the National Green Amendment movement.
It's being
Maya's book
recorded.
was, if there's somebody who's not on mute, let me go find you real quick. Sorry to interrupt there we go. Sorry about that. It coined and defined the term Green Amendment and embarked on the journey of crafting and advancing the National Green Amendment movement. Maya's book was selected as the 2018 Living Now Evergreen Awards Gold winner in the Nature Conservation category and was honored as a 2017 Forward Indies Book of the Year winner. The book's second edition, The Green Amendment, The People's Fight for a Clean, Safe, and Healthy Environment, was released on November 1st, 2022, and is continuing to inspire and educate communities nationwide. The Green Amendment movement is inspiring communities across the nation to secure their own self-executing and enforceable constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment by pursuing green amendments in every state constitution, with interest in a federal green amendment also building. In 2021, the Green Amendment movement inspired and supported passage of the first modern-day Green Amendment in New York State. Over a dozen other states have active Green Amendment efforts underway, with Maya as a key partner and supporter helping to lead the way. Maya is a licensed attorney in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and District of Columbia. And so, for all of these reasons, she was the perfect person to talk to us tonight about Pennsylvania's Green Amendment. And so, with no further ado, take it away, Maya.
All right. Well, that was awesome because it saves me 3 slides. And that is very kind. I really appreciate the introduction. But I do want to say, if you are a member of a local organization or movement and you're not part of the Better Path Coalition already, do join. We do a lot of really important work there in collaboration with people from across the state. So it's a powerful effort, and both Green Amendments for the Generations and Delaware Riverkeeper Network are a part. Did I screen share? No. Did I share? No. So that does no good. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Am I sharing now? Yes. Awesome. So really pleased to be here to talk about how the Pennsylvania Green Amendment can really be a powerful tool in taking on the threat and harms of data centers, but you have to use it in the right way. Karen has already given me a very kind introduction, so I'm going to skip over this. She already told you about the landmark legal victory and the founding of the Green Amendment movement, so I'm going to skip right over that. And we are going to hop right into what I call Pennsylvania's Green Amendment. This is Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, placed in the Declaration of Rights section of the Constitution, where we placed our other most cherished freedoms in the state. It is this section of the Constitution that gives the highest legal standing to the protected rights that are placed there. So it's powerful language, but it is also powerful placement. There are a couple of elements to the amendment that I want to highlight that are really important for tonight's conversation. And, you know, a lot of you, I'm sure, have read it, but let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So the very first provision of the amendment, right, recognizes a right of the people to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment, right? An individual right. This is not giving the people of Pennsylvania the right to clean air, pure water, and a healthy environment. This is recognizing an inalienable human right that we already have. But by virtue of this placement, by virtue of this language, these environmental rights are given highest constitutional recognition and protection, which allows us to more effectively in the courtroom and out of the courtroom secure these critical protections in a really meaningful way. But again, this does not give us the right. This does not create the right. This recognizes the right and gives it highest constitutional standing. The amendment then goes on to recognize that the natural resources of the state are the common property of all the people. And there is legislative history and there is case law that makes very clear we're not just talking about natural resources that are located on public lands. That is not what's meant by public natural resources. These are the resources, right, that are of common value and benefit to all of us. This is not saying that I own the tree in your backyard, right? But that as a collective, the natural resources, our rivers, our forests, our ecological systems, our wildlife are shared by all of us. And so that's really important language and recognition. And it is very clear that these resources don't just belong to those of us here today, but belong to all the future generations yet to come. And that has very powerful legal implications. And then the amendment concludes by recognizing that the Commonwealth, which includes all government officials in the state of Pennsylvania, are the trustees of these natural resources with a duty to conserve and maintain them for we the people, right? And so this creates a trust where the corpus of the trust is the natural resources of the state. Many of you may be more used to a money trust, right? The corpus of the trust there is the money. Here, the corpus of the trust is the natural resources. Government officials are the trustees with certain duties to care for those resources for the benefit of the beneficiaries, who are we the people, including future generations. So those are the elements of the amendment that are critical to be aware of. When we put all this together, right, there are really three very important points for us all to recognize. First off, this creates a right. A right doesn't create a right, sorry, this recognizes a right and gives highest constitutional standing to we the people and our right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And it is very clear by virtue of this language that all government officials in the state have a duty to protect the state's natural resources, and they have a duty to recognize and not infringe upon our environmental rights. But I really like to highlight, while this creates a right, and this creates a right of the people and duty on government officials, more than that, it creates a positive opportunity, right? An opportunity for good government officials to put in place better protections for our environment, to render more protective decisions for the benefit of our environment and we the people. So this is not just an obligation, right, that we are forcing upon our government officials, although when we have to, we might need to utilize it that way. But really, we should look at this as a proactive, positive opportunity for government officials to do better when it comes to protecting our environment
and environmental rights.
Now, by virtue of the actual language of the amendment, but also by legal decisions that have come out of the courts, it is very clear that the obligations that are created, the obligations and the duties created by Article 1, Section 27 apply to all government officials in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all branches of government, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, but also it applies to all levels of government. So it's not just at the state level where government officials are duty bound to honor the environmental rights of the people and serve as trustee of the natural resources, but local government, municipal government also have these constitutional duties and obligations. And we are hearing and have heard municipal officials say, and actually their municipal legal counsel say, no, this doesn't apply at the municipal levels. If you hear your municipal attorney say Article 1, Section 27 does not bind the government officials of that municipality to honor, respect, and protect environmental rights and carry out the trustee duties articulated in Article 1, Section 27, you can get up and very firmly say, you are wrong. And I'll get back to you with the information to prove it. But very clear, the courts are clear, the language is clear, the amendment and its duties and obligations apply at the local government level as well as at the state government level. And those were just a few quotes. Now, when we're thinking about the data center context, I really sort of there are lots of ways we can break up the rights, duties, and entitlements in Article 1, Section 27 to talk about them and their power and importance. But for purposes of the data center, I think it's really important to focus on these two facets. First off, the Pennsylvania Green Amendment creates substantive rights, and it creates also a duty on government officials to engage in informed decision-making. So let's look a little bit more clearly at what each of those pieces are. When we're talking about the substantive right, we, the people, have a right to pure water, clean air, and the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. And these rights belong to we, the people, and government, when it acts, either through its own direct action or through empowering others, may not infringe upon these rights. So that's number one. Substantively, again, the government officials must serve as trustee of the natural resources with a duty to conserve and maintain them for the benefit of we the people. So with regards to the individual right, government may not behave in a way that infringes. When it comes to trustee, or when it comes to the natural resources, government serving as trustee. And that brings into play a lot of law, trust law, that may not be instantly obvious, but as we look at the courts and the case law and how trust law works, we start to see the many important values of this obligation of government to be a trustee of the natural resources. So there are three really important elements of this that I want to highlight, and you're going to be able to start to imagine pretty quickly how this can come into play in the data center context. First off, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but there is this duty of prudence, which means government officials must engage in informed decision making. Right? They can't just render a decision based on what feels good. There is an obligation to ensure that they are acting upon good quality information. There is the duty of loyalty. The duty of loyalty means that the trustee must behave towards the corpus of the trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries. In this context, this means that government officials must conserve and maintain the natural resources of the state for the benefit of who? We, the people, because we are the beneficiaries. They're not conserving and maintaining the natural resources for the benefit of industry profits or their political agendas. It's for we, the people. And then there's this duty of impartiality, and that comes to that brings in the importance of protecting the natural resources of the state equitably for all people. This becomes very important, particularly if you're dealing with an environmental justice community or context, equitable protection of natural resources. And again, there is this obligation to protect generationally. So government officials, when they're thinking about how they conserve and maintain the natural resources of the state, they can't just be thinking about how are they going to conserve and maintain them for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. They actually have to be thinking very long term. How are they going to ensure that natural resources are protected generationally? So future generations also enjoy the right to a quality environment, to quality natural resources. That requires long-term thinking, that requires consideration of cumulative impacts over space, but also through time. So it really changes the mindset of the decision-making process. And then the duty of informed decision-making. Talk about that a little bit more. This obligation of informed decision-making, it comes out of the Declaration of Rights placement of the amendment, but also that trustee obligation. The two sort of come together. And it requires that the government officials, before they take their action, that they undertake a thorough review of the impacts of what they're planning to do, pass a law, pass a regulation, issue a permit, approve a data center. They must consider the environmental rights, and the natural resource protection implications of the action before they act. It can't be an after the fact rationalization. And the courts have been very clear many times over that if that thoughtful, informed decision making does not take place before government renders its action, that decision, whatever it is they did, can actually be challenged on constitutional grounds and can be deemed unconstitutional itself. Right? So because the natural resources belong to we the people, government is the trustee. The trustee has to make sure they know what they're doing, what the implications are for the beneficiaries before they act. Right? If you think about a money trust, it wouldn't be okay for the trustee, the banker or whatever to say, "Oh man, that idea, that investment my brother-in-law told me about sounds really cool. I'm just going to put the money in all of that." And then when the money all gets lost and people get upset, they suddenly scramble together to get the information to say, "Oh, here's why I made that decision. It was a really good decision," and sort of try to do an after the fact rationalization. No. They have to do their research before, look into the investment, look into the opportunity, look into the implications. The same happens here, but it's with regards to the natural resources of the state. So, right, these are basic elements, sort of foundational points of understanding. What does this mean in practice when we're talking about data centers? Well, first, every time you are speaking about an action or a decision related to a data center, whether you're doing advocacy, a private meeting with a government official, pursuing legal action, be clear. I have a right. My right includes pure water, clean air, and the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. And my right includes ensuring that government officials act appropriately as trustee of the natural resources of the state. You want to say that over and over again. It should be the first words out of your mouth. And you want to bring it up no matter what the decision is that's going on. Again, whatever. Is it a zoning change? Is it a request for a special exception or a conditional use? Is it an ordinance that's being developed with regards to a data center? Is the legislator proposing a law? Is it an approval or a permit of a specific data center? Whatever it is, even if it's a private conversation with a government official, make sure that you stress that you know what your rights are and their duties are with regards to the Pennsylvania Green Amendment, Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution. Now, in practicality, when we're talking about data centers, and I'm really right now thinking a lot about at the local level, right? When you have a specific proposal, there's a request for a zoning change or an approval of a project or whatever, right? And you're before that municipal board. In my mind, really the best place generally, right? Every battle's going to be different, and the lay of the land different, but generally, that really good place to start is that issue of informed decision making. Because government officials have to have that good quality information before they can render that constitutionally sound decision, right? It's that process comes first. And that is an important opportunity, one, to make sure government officials know what the heck they're doing before they do it, but for you to make the case about why, they can't or shouldn't do what they're proposing to do. So when you get up there, in whatever context you're talking about, make sure that those government officials, those understand that they are bound by Article 1, Section 27. And again, if the township attorney tells you, no, we're not, you tell them you're wrong, and I'll come back with the information to prove it, right? Or you might have one of our guides in your hand and you can hand them that. You want to make clear that this robust analysis of environmental implications, environmental rights implications, and natural resource implications must be done before that body renders its decision. They have to engage in that thoughtful process first. And then explain to those government officials how they're getting it wrong on the decision-making process. I mean, frankly, with the data center projects and proposals that I've been involved in, what we are seeing is that the data center companies, right, the data center applicants, they're not giving the municipality, the government officials, the full picture. They're using a lot of subjective language. They're leaving out the details of how many generators, what's the land space, it's all, we're going to provide buffers and that's going to make everything okay. We're going to use lighting that's going to, not disturb local communities. We're going to do strategies to keep the sound down. It won't bother anyone. Don't worry about it. Or on the one hand, they make a characterization about the size of the footprint is A, and then the next day, the size of the footprint is B. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the information isn't provided at all, right? The actual quantitative specific information necessary is not provided at all, or the information that is provided over the course of the application, review process is conflicting. One story one day, another story another day, or frankly, you as a community member can demonstrate that the information is simply untrue. It's misleading. No, there are wetlands there. Yes, this is going to have implications for my community. So to me, when you're dealing with that kind of application kind of situation, one of the things that you should be saying to your government officials is, look, you cannot do a constitutionally appropriate review of this project. It is impossible for you to do it because the applicant has not provided you the information in order to do so. And then cite all of these kinds of examples, depending on what you're dealing with. But if they don't have the information, they can't do that robust environmental review, so they cannot render a sound constitutional decision. Or you might be in a situation where your government officials have had loads of information and you've provided it to them about the implications of this project, but they're ignoring it. So they're not looking at all of the information. They're doing a very lopsided decision. And you want to highlight how that is a constitutionally deficient decision-making process. That's a really powerful place to start, in my opinion, when taking on a data center, because in everyone that I've been involved with, we're always having this kind of misinformation campaign at play at one point or another. And remember, that failure to do the informed decision-making can stand on its own. So I have been involved in legal challenges where a permit was issued, not for a data center, but for a project, and we have challenged the decision-making process that resulted in the issuance of the permit. And we were victorious because that informed decision-making demonstrably did not happen. So the permit was declared unconstitutional and the project we were challenging could not go forward. The same could happen with a data center. And again, I just want to highlight this one quote. There are a number of them, but a proceeding is constitutionally inadequate, meaning unconstitutional, unless the governmental body conducts that appropriately thorough environmental review that fulfills their constitutional obligations. So please, please, please remember this part of the constitutional obligation of government, but entitlement of we the people. We are entitled to have our government officials do this work and do it fully, fairly, earnestly, and honestly. Then you can go and speak about the substantive rights and duties. Now, the thing is, we have to remember, right, that a constitutional challenge is a high bar. For you to be able to make a successful constitutional claim that your right to pure water, clean air, the natural, scenic, aesthetic values of the environment are being infringed upon is a high bar. So you're going to have to work at this. It's one of the reasons why I say make sure you do that procedural piece, right? Because it dovetails into this, but that can stand on its own. But I want to be clear, it's a high bar. So you're going to have to do your work and you're going to have to make your case. And you're also going to have to be honest with yourself if you think you're not going to get there, but still make the case, right? Still make the case, because there's a lot of value in public opposition and advocacy. A lot of value. So when we're talking about this substantive rights component, remember there's the environmental rights piece and the natural resource trustee obligation. So when we're talking about the right of the people to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, and aesthetic values of the environment, talk about it all. Waterways, ecological systems, water pollution, air pollution, climate change, light and noise pollution, right? The backup generators and the fossil fuel use that's going to result in local harm, but also what it means for inducing fracking in some other community and the devastating harms that are going to be impacted there. Talk about, lands and landscapes. Talk about all of it. Every data center is a little bit different. So this is certainly a non-exhaustive list. Talk about the wildlife, talk about the plant life, talk about all the facets of a quality environment that contribute to your quality of life and your right to the natural, scenic, aesthetic values of the environment, in addition to pure water, clean air. And really make that robust, well-rounded case. It's very powerful. Even just the testimony, some of the most powerful testimony, I've ever heard is just people speaking passionately about the environment they love. It makes a difference. And then remember to talk about this obligation of government officials to serve as trustee of the natural resources with a duty to protect these natural resources for the benefit of the people. And again, now talk about the natural resource implications a little bit differently. In the first instance, you might be talking about the implications for the river and what it means for you and your environmental rights. Now you can be talking about the impacts to the river and what it means to the community, right? And this duty to conserve and maintain natural resources generationally. It's a little bit different. It's a different perspective. It brings in like just a whole facet of thinking and loving for the nature that enriches and supports all of our lives. Again, bring every single piece of it in that you're aware of, that you can think of, that your research supports, and make the case. Talk about how approving this data center or granting this zoning change is going to result in a violation of your environmental rights and a failure of government officials to protect the natural resources of the state for the benefit of the people. The people. Remember to bring in the generational impacts, right? Because when we're talking about air pollution and water pollution, when we're talking about climate changing emissions, right? A lot of that it might be localized and have one footprint today, but when we start to think generationally and when we start to think cumulatively about this data center and that industrial operation and all the things that are happening around and how that comes together and has implications for those of us here today, but future generations, that's a really powerful component, and you really want to stress that. And do remember again that we are the beneficiaries. And so government must protect these natural resources for we the people. And the courts have also been clear that profits and economic development, right, cannot take place at the expense of an unreasonable degradation of the environment. And they are talking about this in the context of our environmental rights, of the Pennsylvania Green Amendment, of Article 1, Section 27. And so when these data centers come in touting jobs, economic development, and all the money they're going to give to the community for this program and that program and that program, you can rest assured and be very, very clear that none of that can be used as an argument to displace the duty of government officials to respect and protect your environmental rights and fulfill their natural resource trustee obligations. Now, strategically, right, it's going to be better to defend a good outcome and a good decision that you agree with than to challenge one. Again, a constitutional challenge is a high bar, right? It's a big deal. So if you can, through all of your good advocacy, get your government officials to render the correct decision in the first place and assure them that if that correct decision is challenged by the data center, you and your community will stand with the government officials in defense of that good decision, you're going to be in a much better posture. And we have had good government officials render really good decisions to protect public natural open space, to put in place protective ordinances, to do all kinds of good things, citing their duty to protect the environmental rights of the people. And so use that, get your government officials to understand that the Green Amendment is, again, not just an obligation, but an opportunity for them to do it right in the first place, and assure them that you will stand with them, because you're going to be in a much better position strategically if you're advocating from that posture. Now, ordinances. I want to talk a little bit about ordinances, and then we'll go to Q&A, and I don't have my phone here, so I don't know what time it is. But when it comes to ordinances, it's really important here, too, that people are mindful about how Article 1, Section 27, the Pennsylvania Green Amendment, is being used. When you use it properly, it is a tool for good. But if you use it improperly, the amendment could actually be used in a way, or the amendment could be cited in the ordinance in a way that could actually strip government and the people of the legal strength that the Green Amendment should otherwise provide. So let's explore why. So first off, when we're talking about a municipal ordinance, there are three pieces we want to include. We want to include acknowledgement of the Pennsylvania Green Amendment and the rights and duties. We want to be clear that the amendment is to serve as a guide for how the ordinance is to be interpreted and applied, but also that it's an obligation that stands on its own right. And then we want to do an element that ensures this robust review. So in the acknowledgement section, in the whereas clauses of any ordinance, we want our government officials to talk about Article 1, Section 27 and all the wonderful things that it does and that we've just talked about. We want them to be clear about the rights of the people, about their trustee duties, that the Article 1, Section 27 applies to government itself. Cite it, quote it, talk about it. I'm going to give you later information on how to get an ordinance resource that we've created where we give actual sample language that you could use and take to your community to accomplish all of these things that I'm going to talk about, or at least as a starting place. Then when you get into the body of the ordinance, you're going to want to make sure to include language that makes very clear that Article 1, Section 27 should serve as a guide for the interpretation and application of the elements of the ordinance. So when the government is engaged in decision making about a data center and it talks about the importance of protecting clean water, that interpretation of whether or not the clean water is being properly protected is interpreted through the lens of we the people have a right. Okay, so it should help ensure a stronger, not weaker, a stronger interpretation of the environmental elements of the data center ordinance, right? So it informs how the ordinance is interpreted and applied by the government officials. But you cannot stop there. You then have to be very clear that in addition, there must be additional language that says, in addition to meeting all of the standards that are articulated in the ordinance about noise and light and air and water and this and that and all these other wonderful things, the government officials must also independently do an analysis to ensure that the approval of the project or whatever action they're proposing to take will not violate the rights and duties in Article 1, Section 27. There are two pieces. If all government does is in the whereas clauses say, people have a right, we have a duty, Article 1, Section 27, and then the body of the ordinance lays out all sorts of environmental standards, weak or strong, and you find yourself faced with a data center decision that is a bad one, and the approval of a data center that's going to inflict overwhelming harm on the environment, despite the fact that it complies with all those ordinance elements, right? Like in the place and space where it's proposed, it will result in overwhelming harm. If you've never made clear in the ordinance that the constitutional compliance piece stands on its own, then if you were to challenge that let's say that data center approval, the government officials who rendered that bad decision and the data center themselves may come back and respond legally by saying, hey, listen, man, the way the ordinance was written, the local government was clear that all of these standards that they included in the ordinance, that was how they did their constitutional analysis and review work. And they determined that if all of these standards are met, that necessarily the constitutional rights and duties will have been complied with. And it is not unlikely that the court would say yes, that is correct. So it's not good enough, right? And so again, it's not just that it's not good enough to just cite the amendment and have standards and not be clear about this freestanding, independent, additional obligation. It could be used against you if you try to make a claim based on constitutional grounds. So that's very, very important. Some people miss that, okay? Constitutional compliance just is in addition to, not displaced by, the ordinance provisions and standards. And again, in the handbook that I'm going to give you a link to, we give you some language to help speak to that. And then you're going to want to make sure that the ordinance includes language about this robust decision-making process. You're going to want to be very clear that municipal decision makers use the ordinance to not just secure the information they need to render a good decision, but to actually ensure that they are obliged to review all of the information that they receive, right? So you're going to want to have language, you're going to want to, in the ordinance, make clear that they have to do this robust review and have the municipality tell the applicant, you have to give us all of this environmental information and analyses so we can do our work. But you also want them to be very clear that they are inviting information from the public and that the government has a duty to consider all of the information that is readily available to them, what they receive from the applicant, what they receive from the public, and frankly, other information that's reasonably and readily available. Okay, and then again, ensure this robust review. When you do it that way, you are in a better position and posture if you are in a situation where the municipal government is just relying on what the data center says and disregarding the good information that the people give. You're going to be in a much stronger position to take that on. So those are all the pieces I want to talk about. I've got we've just created at Green Amendments for the Generations, a couple of new toolkits. One is how to make these arguments in the regarding in a data center battle using Article 1, Section 27. There's a lot of guidance on all these elements I talked about, but also sample language. We also have, again, guidance and sample language for if you're in a situation where you're advocating for an ordinance within your municipality or an amendment to an ordinance that's not strong enough. Make sure that this Article 1, Section 27 piece is in there. And again, we give sample language and information. And then we also have a new toolkit, which is just generally about the rights, duties, and obligations that government officials, municipal government officials, are bound by because of Article 1, Section 27. And then, of course, there's the book. So with that, I will stop share and answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Maya. And I'll need all those links to put into the email afterwards, if you don't
And you
mind
will
sending.
get them.
Thank you. So you just mentioned all those great resources, but we had a couple of questions along the way, and so I'll just put them out there in terms of some of the other kind of resources people are looking for, and you can tell us if they're already in what you're providing. Can you provide case citations to help our community members support their applications for party status based on the Green Amendment?
For party, so I don't think I have case citations for that. You're talking about parties. Are you talking about bringing a legal action? Are you talking about, right? So it's a little bit hard. So when you're going through the municipal process and right that's a whole body of law. So I don't have specific resources or references with regards to Article 1, Section 27, but you are very likely going to be dealing with an attorney who's going to be able to help you with that. Or, you can follow up with me and we can work on getting you things that might be helpful. But you're probably not going to be relying only on Article 1, Section 27, right? There are a lot of elements that you need to engage in that way. So you're going to want to have all the pieces.
There was another question about can you provide a list of examples to ask for? And this was when you were talking about the environmental review and, how you should be, pointing out all the various things they should be thinking about. Is there a good list of that? I remember from when we were fighting Penny's pipeline, for instance, on the docket, we just told everybody anything you think of, mention it because you don't need to be the subject matter expert to know that it's an issue. You need to be concerned that it's an issue. Is that a fair standard? Or
That is a fair standard, 100%. So I will say that. I will also give a little bit of a heads up that Annika on the Delaware Riverkeeper Network team is actually pulling together a resource that will help in that front. And we have also been doing at Green Amendments for the Generations and Delaware Riverkeeper Network, pulling our resources when some people have had a municipal ordinance and they've wanted some feedback on what are the gaps. And we've been providing some specific comments. We've done a specific comment for Lower Mount Bethel Township's ordinance that's in process. We did one for Moore Township that's ordinances in process. And there are some, Karen, that you had shared with us. So, you can also reach out to me and I will put my email in the chat and, we'll connect you up with that. But a resource is coming. Resource is coming.
I'm not sure I understand this question, so I might ask Scott to take yourself off mute. But if things were done already and before this amendment was reinstated, can actions be challenged constitutionally? I know this probably isn't relevant to data centers since they were so new, but
I got it.
You
I
got it. Okay.
understand. Yeah. So, green amendments, if they're passed fresh, right, are not retroactive. And, if we're talking about things that happened before our landmark legal victory against Act 13 in December 2013, that was a long time ago. So I think that it's very general, the question you're asking. So there are a lot of nuances. But the thing to know, right, is we do have a living, breathing, thriving Green Amendment now today. And even if there was a decision rendered in the past that's resulting in environmental rights, having environmental rights implications, chances are that there's an action or a decision happening today that is perpetuating that harm. Perhaps there was a permit to an industrial operation. Well, that permit issued under state law has to be renewed periodically. The renewal of that permit in a way that is perpetuating a violation of Article 1, Section 27, that renewal is fresh action today that you could challenge on legal and or constitutional grounds. We've even had, if there was an action in the past in our case with regards to Bishop Tube, we've been very effective at making the argument in the court and out of the courts that this toxic site that was contaminated decades ago, that the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection was ignoring, and rather than enforce existing law to secure cleanup of that long ignored toxic contamination, negotiated a sweetheart deal with a developer to allow that toxic site to be developed while it was rendered in its toxic condition. The failure of the state to enforce the law all that time was an actual choice, an action that they took today that allowed the perpetuation of that historic harm. So that's the thing, is you're going to look for the action or activity that government is undertaking today that you can challenge, even if it's a harm that originated from the past. Hopefully that helps.
There are several questions about how to find attorneys. The most urgent one comes from Daniel saying, Muncie Township Concerned Citizens Group needs an attorney now to help us with an appeal process. Can you give us names and contacts of people to help us? They have an August 15th deadline to appeal the deemed,
Yeah.
pardon me, I just lost it off the screen. But they have until August 15th to appeal our deemed approval.
Yeah. So, my first go-to recommendation for anything, especially if you're considering including a constitutional piece, but also now on data centers, is John Smith from Smith and Butts, but he's all the way out in Western Pennsylvania. So I'm not sure that he's going to be available. If you want to send me an email after the fact, I can maybe offer up some ideas. The attorneys at Curtin and Hefner, there might be an opportunity there. I know Mark Freed spoke at our co-sponsored webinar on Tuesday. He might have some recommendations. So, but follow up with me after rather than talking in this space. How's that?
Thank you. I'm just it's hard to scroll through, but let me close the participant. Maybe I
And
can see
Dan, I'll
that.
put my email in again just so you have it.
So I have to ask this question because I think it's a question everybody asks at some point or another. Is, we have this in our Constitution. We've had it for more than 50 years in our Constitution. Every one of these elected officials at the state level, at least they all did it, but the state level people should know that they swore an oath to uphold that Constitution. So why do we even have to go through this? Why don't they know? And there are various versions of that question, but generally, why is it not good enough to have that protection?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So first off, it's almost as if while the Green Amendment was actually added to the Pennsylvania Constitution in 1971, the truth is it didn't have legal vitality or meaningful strength for 42 years until the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, along with the municipalities, brought our victory. So it's almost as if the amendment was just passed in December of 2013. And when you have a new right and entitlement, it takes time to exercise it. It takes time to get the reviews and the decisions and the decision making that make clear to our government officials, this is real, this is meaningful, this is enforceable. And if you fail to respect and protect our environmental rights and fulfill your constitutional duties, we can take you to court and win. Right. And so we're in that process now. I mean, if you think about it, we've had the right to free speech for, hundreds of years, and yet there are still places and spaces and legal actions where it comes up. right to bear arms, all of these things. When it comes to our environmental rights, it's very fresh and it's very new. And unfortunately, government officials who don't value a quality environment are still trying, many of them are still trying to get away with what they can get away with. That's sort of number one. Number two, while you would expect that they would have read the Constitution and understand what their obligations are as elected officials, I think many of them do not. So they don't actually know, or they're newly elected. But at the municipal level, there is turnover all the time, right? And municipal government officials are often people who have a day job, they have a night job, right? They have a lot going on, and they are not, there are not offerings of effective trainings to our government officials to make sure that they understand um, what Article 1, Section 27 says, does, is, and that it's real and that they are accountable to it. So it's one of the reasons why we did the guide. And I will offer to anybody, if if you feel like a presentation before your municipality would be helpful, if you want a copy of the resource, I want to be as helpful as possible to help you get your local government and your state government to understand that this is true, meaningful, and enforceable. But it's like every right? The only way it gets real strength and that we ensure our government officials honor the rights is if we, the people, exercise them and hold them accountable when they fail. And this is a brand new right, whether you're in Pennsylvania or anywhere else, because of that history. And we, the people, just have to do the work. But we have it, and it's making a difference, and it does take time. But if you go to the resources page of greenamendment.org, and go to the resources page, there's a link, and I try to write up a lot of the most powerful legal victories as they come up in Pennsylvania and in the other states. So you can really see it wasn't just that one landmark victory, right? There are many, and there are more and more coming out all the time. And every time we have a victory, we set precedent. But more than that, we're starting to see our government officials proactively rely on the amendment to render good decisions. Like in Lower Merion, they just passed a municipal ordinance in the recent past that put in place a prohibition on gas-fired or gas-fired, natural gas-powered leaf blowers because of pollution, noise, and climate changing emissions. I bet you anything, years ago, people said, no way you could do that. But these good government officials saw it as a need and saw the Green Amendment as an opportunity that would provide them with the legal foundation they needed to do the right thing for their community and their environment. And I think that that's a really good example. People would have thought, you get your government officials to do the right thing, and then you stand with them if it's challenged.
I'm going to ask one of my own questions because it relates to some of the other things I'm reading here. And it's something we've been talking about in some of our meetings recently, and that is that, they always say, well, the municipal government can't say no to something that is a regulated industry in the state, or, they have all these various rationales for why a municipality can't say no. And then Lisa asks in the chat, local governments hire experts who are biased, but agencies just claim that everybody else's data is wrong, and how do people challenge these, experts, especially when in the end we're being told that they can't really actually do anything other than find a good place for something, even if it violates our constitutional rights. How does all that square?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of these things that we are in the process of making that square in a way that is, protective of the people and our environment. And so it is when we look at data centers, and again, this idea that we are forced to accept them, right? And that's the way the law works. I think that there are many of us who are doing a lot of work, including, the Better Path Coalition, Green Amendments for the Generations, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, trying to look at those legal assertions and see how they actually play out in the data center context. So in this particular moment, I'm with you. It all seems very wrong, unjust, and inequitable, but we're doing the work. to figure out how to make it right. And I do just want to emphasize, I know that there are a lot of things environmentally that are happening, and it just like makes your mind explode. How is it possible that this is happening in Pennsylvania when we have this constitutional right? And the reality is what I said before, it's early days, and we just have to do the work. We had 42 years of having this language, and it didn't mean jack shit. But we had the right case. We were brave enough to bring the legal challenge. We were victorious. We made a difference. And ever since then, we've been having victory after victory after victory, where we're proving the point that having this constitutional right does mean something and does make a difference. And we're having to do it in all these different contexts. Data centers are new. So now we're going to have to prove the point in the context of the data center. And that's why I love that so many of you have joined on, because if we use Article 1, Section 27 in the wrong way, which is why it was derailed for that 42 years, people made stupid decisions. They overreached in how they sought to use the amendment. And the court said, holy crow, if this is what you're going to do with this language, we're going to smack that down, right? And it took us so long to overcome that. So if you use it, if you're not strategic about it, you're handing the opportunity to the opposition, right, to do it the wrong way. So in data centers, we've got to be smart, and we've got to do it the right way. And we've got to build the victories and the case law to prove the point that when it comes to data centers, Article 1, Section 27 makes a meaningful difference. And you know, and all of you taking this information and helping to ensure we're using the amendment the right way is part of that work. And I know we're going to get there. I know we're going to get there. And all these people said we could not beat Act 13, but we did, right? So we're going to do it again with regards to data centers. It's just, we got to do the building blocks. We got to do the work, and we're doing the work.
Well, it's 8:01, so that seems like an appropriate place to call it a night. And thank you so much for doing this presentation. We had so many great questions. I do apologize we couldn't get to all of them, but this conversation's not over, so we'll keep at it. But what can people do if they want to help you at Green Amendments, Maya?
Um, um, be an effective advocate for the Green Amendment. If you go to the link, I'll put it again. If you join Green Amendments for the Generations, it doesn't cost anything. You shouldn't have to pay to have a voice, right, in environmental protection. And join the organization. That gives us strength and standing when we do the advocacy and our legal work with regards to the Green Amendment. And if you have a really good situation, or really good, if you have a really bad situation and you think that I can help, reach out. I really, really want to help. So just reach out, and I will do my best. And let's find these really, strong examples that are going to prove the point that a Green Amendment makes a difference in the context of data centers. And let's get those good ordinances.
Thank you. Everyone, this is the beginning of a series of things that we're trying to bring you this kind of information. And so we do have a bunch of ideas in mind already. But if there's something that you would like to learn about that we might not have thought of, please, when I send the email out with the recording, feel free to respond or hang on to the email and respond at any time with your ideas. So we can try to identify the right speakers to bring those topics to you as well. But I know we're going to be doing one on how to do a right to know request. And we have another one coming up closer to the fall when the legislators come back about what all the bills are that are floating out there. So we have a lot of things in mind already, watchdogging, a whole bunch of things. And so, please, please think about things that you'd like us to be covering, and we'll do our best to do it. And we have Hillary Flint here from Kogo, who's doing her own series, so you'll hear it from her too. She's eager to hear what you want to do, what you want to learn about, and we'll share our input that we receive with her. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And Maya, I love you. Thank you so much. Thanks for doing this and for doing everything that you do.
Thank you. Remember, join the Better Path Coalition and Green Amendments for the Generations.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, good night, everyone. Have a great evening.